I can still remember the taste of my own spit. That's what I think about sometimes, when the war horns sound and my body moves without thought, when the targeting data floods my optic feeds and my legs carry me across killing fields at speeds that should shatter bone. I remember what it was like to be thirsty, to swallow, to feel the simple animal need for water in a throat that was entirely my own. They don't tell you that these are the things you'll miss. They speak of glory and sacred duty, of the honor of serving the Omnissiah's greatest works. They never mention the taste of your own mouth, or how you'll search your memory for it years later, like a man trying to recall his mother's face. I was 23 standard years when I passed the Secutarii trials on Metallica. The pride I felt then, that emotion exists in my databanks, catalogued and preserved, but I cannot recreate the sensation of it. I know I wept when they fitted the first augmetics, the basic enhancements that would allow me to keep pace with a god-machine's stride. I know this because the record exists in my personal log, an entry I made that night in the candidate's barracks. Today I became more than human. Today I became a guardian of the machine god's will. The handwriting is mine, or was mine, though my hands have changed 3 times since then. The sentiment is foreign now, the naive earnestness of it almost painful to process. They assigned me to the Ferrum Vindicta, a warlord, class Titan of the Legio Metallica. I remember standing in its shadow for the first time in the deployment hangar, my neck craned back to take in the immensity of it. 100 meters of adamantium and ceramite and fury, its void shields flickering with barely restrained power. The heat radiating from its plasma reactor made the air shimmer. I could feel it on my face, the only part of me not yet sheathed in the carapace armor of the Secutarii. The other guards in my cohort, 36 of us, fresh from the trials, stood in formation, and I could see my own awe reflected in their optics. We didn't speak. We had been taught that silence was the first discipline of the Secutarii, that we must learn to exist in the spaces between the Titan's thoughts. The Princeps came to inspect us that day, descending from the command throne in the Titan's head via a maintenance lift, Princeps Kurbos. I remember him vividly, perhaps because he was the first person I met who had already crossed the threshold I was approaching. His face was more metal than flesh, his eyes replaced by targeting arrays that clicked and whirred as they focused. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that matched the Titan's vox emitters, as if he were merely echoing something the god machine had already said. "You are not warriors," he told us. "You are the Ferrum Vindicta's immune system. You will learn to feel what it feels, to react as it would react. In time, you will not know where you end and it begins. This is the greatest honor the Mechanicum can bestow." I believed him. Emperor help me, I believed every word. The first augmentation cycle began immediately. They took us in groups of 6 to the modification chambers deep in the forge, temple's sublevels. I remember the smell of the place, sacred oils and burned metal and something else, something organic and wrong that the incense couldn't quite mask. The tech priests worked in silence, their mechadendrites moving with the precision of surgical instruments. They removed pieces of me. I understand that now, though at the time they framed it as enhancement. Neural ports drilled into the base of my skull, muscle augmetics grafted to my legs and spine. A secondary heart, mechanical and regular, installed in my chest cavity. But the most significant change was the resonator, a small device, no larger than my thumb, implanted directly into my brain stem. The tech priest who installed it. I don't remember his designation, only the red of his robes and the way his voice buzzed through a Vox grill. Explained that it would allow me to maintain awareness of the Titan's status at all times. "You will feel when it is damaged," he said. "You will know when enemies approach. You will be its eyes in the places it cannot see." He did not mention that I would also hear it, always, every moment of every day, the distant thunder of its reactor pulse, a sound like the heartbeat of a god, constant and inescapable. We trained for 6 months before the Ferrum Vindicta deployed to war. 6 months of running alongside the Titan in the testing fields, our legs pounding against the rockcrete as it strode through simulated combat scenarios. 6 months of learning to fire our galvanic carbines and arc lances, while our targeting system synchronized with the Titan's sensor arrays. 6 months of standing watch during its rest cycles, our bodies motionless for hours while our augmented metabolisms kept us alert. I grew stronger, faster. My reaction time decreased to fractions of a second. I could process tactical data streams that would have given my former self seizures. I was becoming what they had promised, a perfect guardian. But there were things I noticed even then. Anomalies that troubled me in the rare moments when I was alone with my thoughts. The Secutarii veterans who oversaw our training never spoke about their own service. When I asked how long they had served with their Titans, they would simply redirect to the training drill, their voices flat and identical. I tried to find records of previous Secutarii cohorts, accessing the Forge, Temple's data archives during a rest period, but the entries were sparse and contradictory. The Imperium Vindicta had been in service for 8 centuries. It should have gone through dozens of guard cohorts, perhaps hundreds, but the records only showed 3 generations of Secutarii in all that time. I asked my squad mate, Tertius, 9, about it. We were standing watch together in the Titan's hangar, the god machine towering above us in its dormant state, the low rumble of its reactor the only sound in the vast space. Tertius, 9, had been augmented more extensively than the rest of us. He had volunteered for experimental modifications, eager to prove his devotion. Half his face was a mask of brushed steel, and his left arm had been replaced entirely with a complex assembly of servo, motors and hydraulics. "Why do you think about such things?" he asked me, his voice carrying a slight mechanical distortion that hadn't been there a month before. "Because the numbers don't match," I said. "I for Secutarii cohort serves for only a few years before being rotated out. Where do they go? What happens to them?" Tertius, 9, was silent for a long moment, his optic focusing on something I couldn't see. Then he said, "They ascend. They become one with the Omnissiah's chosen. It is the final gift." But there was something in the way he said it, a rehearsed quality, as if he were reciting a catechism he didn't fully understand. I didn't press him further. Even then, something in me was learning not to ask questions. Our first deployment came in the depths of winter on Vimla IV, a contested world where the forces of the arch-enemy had established beachheads in the northern hive clusters. The Imperium Vindicta was one of 6 Titans sent to break the siege, and we Secutarii deployed with it, 36 guards surrounding the god machine in a protective cordon as it marched to war. I had expected to feel fear, but what I felt instead was a kind of terrible exhilaration. The Titan's reactor pulse was loud in my head, faster now, eager, and my own heart's, both of them, matched its rhythm. I moved through the ruins of the outer hive without conscious thought, my carbine tracking targets before my conscious mind registered them. We were attacked by cultist forces, hundreds of them, and I killed with the cold efficiency of a machine. Headshot, body shot, another headshot. The arc lance on my back discharged its killing lightning into an approaching technical, and I was already moving to the next target before the vehicle finished exploding. We fought for 3 days without sleep. My augmented body didn't need rest the way my old flesh had, and the stimulant dispensers built into my armor kept the edges sharp. I don't remember much of those 72 hours, just images, fragments, sensations. The sound of the Titan's volcano cannon firing, a noise so loud it seemed to compress reality itself, the smell of burned flesh and promethium. The way my squad moved in perfect synchronization, as if we shared a single mind. Perhaps we did. The resonators in our heads were all tuned to the same frequency, all hearing the same god-machine heartbeat. We lost 4 Secutarii in that first battle. I don't remember their designations. I know I should, but the data isn't accessible anymore. What I do remember is that within hours of their deaths, 4 new Secutarii had been assigned to our cohort, transferred from another Titan whose princeps had fallen in combat. They integrated seamlessly, as if they had always been with us. When I tried to speak with one of them, to ask about their previous deployment, they simply looked at me with optics that held no recognition, no personality. They stood watch. They fought when commanded, but there was no one home behind their eyes. I began to pay attention after that. I started keeping a private log, entries that I encrypted and stored in an isolated data core that wasn't networked to the Titan's systems. I documented everything I could about my own thoughts, my memories, my sense of self. I recorded the names of my squad mates, their quirks and habits, the small human details that made them individuals. Tertius, 9's habit of humming hymns during maintenance. Decimus, 4's collection of spent shell casings, each one marked with a notation of the kill. Vicesimus, 7's fear of heights, incongruous in a soldier who fought beside a 100-meter war machine. But as the months passed, those details began to fade, not from my log, the data remained intact, but from the people themselves. Tertius, 9 stopped humming. Decimus, 4 abandoned his collection. Vicesimus, 7 showed no hesitation when ordered to fight on the upper levels of a manufactorum tower. They were becoming standardized, I realized. Generic, as if something was slowly sanding away the rough edges of their personalities, leaving only the essential functions required to serve. I checked my own logs obsessively, reading and rereading the entries to confirm that I was still myself, still the person who had written those words. But increasingly, I found discrepancies, gaps in my memory that the logs revealed. Entire battles I couldn't recall fighting. A 2-week period where, according to my encrypted records, I had been transferred to a different Titan for emergency duty. But I had no memory of the transfer, no recollection of serving with any god machine, but the Ferum Vindicta. The sound of the Titan's reactor was growing louder in my head. I began to hear it even when I was kilometers away, even when the Ferum Vindicta was powered down for maintenance. The rhythmic throb of its plasma heart became my constant companion, a baseline reality that underlay everything else. I mentioned it to the tech priest during my routine diagnostic, and he nodded as if this were expected. "The bond deepens," he said. "You are becoming attuned. This is the purpose of the resonator." He made adjustments to my neural implants, and for a few days the sound receded slightly, but it always came back. Louder, more insistent. We deployed to Gaia Secundus next, a fortress world where the greenskin menace had overrun the planetary defense forces. The fighting was brutal and continuous, the orcs throwing themselves at the Titan in waves that seemed to have no end. I killed hundreds of them, maybe thousands. My targeting cogitator tracked each kill, adding to a tally that had become meaningless. What did numbers matter when you could no longer remember the difference between yesterday and 6 months ago? It was during the Gaia campaign that I found the data slate. We were securing a destroyed Mechanicus outpost, clearing the rubble for salvageable tech, when I discovered it in what had once been an archive chamber. The slate was damaged, its screen cracked, but it still held power. I activated it and found myself reading a personal log, entries that dated back 5 years. The author identified themselves as Secutarii Primus designation Gamma 12, assigned to the Ferum Vindicta. I read the entries with growing horror. They described the same progression I was experiencing. The augmentations, the training, the first battles, the growing sense that something was wrong with the passage of time, with memory, with identity. And then, near the end of the log, a single entry that made my secondary heart stutter in its mechanical rhythm. I checked the Legio personnel records today. I found my own designation listed as deceased, terminated in combat 3 years ago. But I'm still here, I'm still fighting. I don't understand what I am anymore. The final entry was dated 6 months after that revelation. It read simply, "The sound is everything now. I can't hear my own thoughts. I don't think they're mine anyway. We are the Vindicta. We have always been the Vindicta. There is no before," and deleted my access logs and hid the slate in my armor storage compartment. That night, standing watch while the Ferum Vindicta underwent reactor maintenance, I tried to access the Legio's personnel database. My security clearance shouldn't have been sufficient, but somehow the system accepted my credentials. I searched for my own designation. I found 6 entries, 6 different Secutarii, all with my designation, all assigned to the Ferum Vindicta, spanning the last 200 years, each one terminated after approximately 3 years of service. The causes of death varied: combat casualties, training accidents, integration failure. The most recent termination was dated 8 months ago, but I had been serving for 8 months. I was the most recent entry, and according to the records, I was already dead. I should have felt panic, terror, some human emotion appropriate to the discovery. Instead, I felt only a distant curiosity, as if I were reading about someone else's fate. The Titan's reactor pulse filled my head, steady and patient, and I realized I was matching my breathing to its rhythm without conscious intent. Throb, 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 my hearts, organic and mechanical both, beating in synchronization with the god machine. I began to observe the other Secutarii more carefully after that, looking for signs of what I was becoming. They moved with perfect efficiency, responding to threats with reaction times that exceeded even our augmented capabilities. During one engagement, I watched as Quintus 8 took a cultist's lasfire to the chest, a hit that should have at least staggered him, and continued advancing without breaking stride, returning fire with his carbine while his armor smoldered. He killed his attacker, completed the tactical objective, and only then requested medical attention. When the tech priest examined him, they found that the las bolt had penetrated his primary heart, destroying it completely. Quintus 8 had fought for 37 minutes on his backup systems alone, driven purely by the Titan's imperatives transmitted through his resonator. He received a commendation for his dedication. They replaced his destroyed heart with an improved mechanical model. Within a week, he was back on duty, and I never heard him mention the injury. It was as if it had happened to someone else. I started testing myself, small experiments to determine how much of my humanity remained. I would try to deviate from optimal tactical positioning during watch, just slightly, to see if I could. I found that I couldn't. My body moved to the correct positions automatically, overriding my conscious will. I tried to remember my life before the Secutarii trials, my childhood on Metallica, my family, my reasons for volunteering. The memories were there, I could access them as data, but they had no emotional resonance. They were facts about a person who shared my designation, but whom I no longer recognized as myself. The sound of the Titan's reactor had become my entire world. I heard it when I slept, when I ate the nutrient paste that sustained my augmented metabolism, when I fought and killed and stood watch. It was always there, always present, and increasingly I realized that my own thoughts emerged from that sound, were shaped by it. The Titan was not separate from me. It was the foundation of my consciousness, the ground from which my awareness grew. We deployed to 12 more war zones over what my logs tell me was the next 2 years. I say, what my logs tell me, because I have no sense of time passing anymore. There are battles, and then there are more battles, and in between there are moments of stillness where I stand and wait for the next battle. The Titan moves, and I move with it. The Titan fights, and I fight with it. The distinction between these states has become academic. I access the data state I had hidden, the one from the Secutari who had served before me, and I added my own entries. I wanted to leave a record, a warning for whoever came after. But as I wrote, I found myself using the same phrases, the same descriptions, sometimes the exact same sentences that the previous Guardian had written. Our experiences were identical, our thoughts were identical. We were all walking the same path, experiencing the same progression, arriving at the same conclusion. The Titan chooses its guards. That's what I've come to understand. The resonators don't just let us hear the God machine. They let it hear us. They let it know us. They let it reshape us into the extensions it requires. The augmentations, the training, the constant exposure to its presence, all of it is a process of transformation, of conversion. We don't protect the Titan. We become parts of the Titan, living sensors and weapon platforms that can operate in environments where the God machine cannot reach. I found records of the other Titans in the Legio, and I checked their Secutari rosters. Every Titan maintains its cohort at exactly 36 guards, no more, no fewer. Every Secutari serves for approximately 3 years before termination, or integration failure, or combat casualty. And every Titan has personnel records showing the same designations recurring across centuries. We are not individuals, we are iterations. The Titan takes in raw material, ambitious young soldiers who pass the trials, and shapes them into the pattern it needs. When we have served our purpose, when the bond has consumed too much of what we were, we are quietly terminated and replaced. The new recruits integrate seamlessly because they're not really new. They're just the latest version of an archetype the Titan has been refining for centuries. Tertius, 9 is gone now. He was killed 6 months ago during a battle against a Chaos Titan on Mordax Prime. I say killed, but what I mean is that he stopped functioning. There was no body to recover, no burial rites to perform. He simply fell during combat, and when we extracted after the battle, he wasn't with us anymore. Within hours, a new Tertius, 9 had joined the cohort, speaking in the same mechanical tones, moving with the same efficient precision. I tried to grieve, but grief is a human emotion, and I'm not certain I qualify as human anymore. My designation is Primus. I am the first among the Secutarii, the squad leader, though the distinction is functionally meaningless. We all follow the same imperatives transmitted through our resonators. We all move to the Titan's rhythm. During the battle on Mordax Prime, when I was engaging the corrupted Secutarii that guarded the Chaos Titan, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The enemy guards moved differently than we did. Their augmentations were twisted, heretical, but they still served their god, machine, with the same absolute dedication. We killed each other with perfect efficiency, not out of hatred or faith or any recognizable human motivation, but because our respective titans commanded it. In that moment, I understood that there was no meaningful difference between us. We were both just extensions of larger machines, tools being used for their intended purpose. The Ferrum Vindicta was damaged badly in that battle. A catastrophic hit to its left void shield generator, followed by weapons fire that tore through its leg actuators. It fell, actually fell, the ground shaking with the impact. I felt it through the resonator, felt the pain of systems failing, of structure compromising, of the plasma reactor cycling down to emergency levels. And I felt something else too, the Titan's fear. Not a human fear, but the machine cognition equivalent, a prioritization cascade that identified survival as paramount. It needed help, it needed its guards. We responded without hesitation, all 36 of us moving as one. We cleared the area around the fallen Titan, killed everything that approached, held the perimeter while the recovery Titans arrived. I don't remember how long we fought. My combat logs say it was 6 hours, but it felt like no time at all, or perhaps forever. What I remember is the sound, the constant throb, throb, throb of the Titan's reactor struggling to maintain power, and the way that sound was my entire reality. Nothing else existed, no exhaustion, no pain, no sense of self beyond the imperative to protect, to serve, to be what the Titan needed. They repaired the Ferrum Vindicta over the course of 3 months, replacing damaged components, reconsecrating the void shield generators, rebuilding the compromised armor plates. During that time, we Secutarii remained on station, maintaining watch even though the Titan was dormant and unable to fight. We stood in the repair bay, 36 statues in carapace armor, our optics tracking movement, our weapons ready. The tech priests worked around us as if we were fixtures, just another component of the Titan to be maintained. I tried to remember what I had been before. I accessed my encrypted logs, read the entries from my first weeks of service. That person, the one who had worried about missing cohorts, who had kept records and asked questions, seemed impossibly distant. An alien consciousness wearing my designation. I understood what they had felt. I could process the information they had recorded, but I couldn't connect with their emotional state. They had been afraid of losing their humanity. I had no such fear now because I had no humanity to lose. The princeps came to inspect us during the repair period. Kurbos, he looked even less human than I remembered, more metal than flesh, his voice perfectly synchronized with the Titan's Vox systems. He walked among us, and we stood at attention, perfect and still. "You serve well," he said, and there was approval in his tone. Not warmth. The princeps was incapable of warmth, but satisfaction. We were functioning as designed. I wanted to ask him if he knew what we were. If he understood that we weren't really individual guards, but rather distributed components of the Titan's sensory array. But I couldn't form the question. The imperative to maintain silence, to preserve the operational security of the Legio, overrode any impulse to speak. Instead, I stood and received his approval, and some part of me that still remembered being human felt a distant horror at the pride that data spike generated in my cognitive systems. We returned to combat after the repairs were complete. The wars blur together now, indistinguishable battles on indistinguishable worlds. I fight with absolute efficiency, my kill count climbing into numbers that have ceased to have meaning. I am wounded regularly, last burns, shrapnel impacts. One memorable instance where a greenskin managed to embed an axe in my shoulder before I killed it. Each time the tech priests repair me, replacing damaged components with improved models, upgrading my systems, making me more effective. I am stronger now than I was at the beginning, faster, more lethal. But there is less of me. I found another data slate recently. This one was hidden in the personal effects of one of the other Secutarii who had been terminated, a soldier whose designation I don't remember. The entries were fragmentary, corrupted. But I could read enough to understand that they had gone through the same realization I had. They had tried to resist, had attempted to maintain their humanity through force of will and careful record-keeping. But in the end, they had accepted the inevitable. The final entry was dated 3 days before their termination's resistance is inefficient. The Titan provides purpose. The Titan provides meaning. Individuality is a flaw in the system. We were always meant to be this. I go to join the Omnissiahs chosen with gratitude for the clarity. I added my own entries to that slate. Not a warning this time, but a record of acceptance. Because that's what I've come to understand. This isn't a tragedy. This is function. This is purpose. The Imperium requires God machines to fight its wars, and God machines require extensions that can operate in environments they cannot reach. We Secutarii are those extensions. The process that transforms us is not corruption or degradation. It is optimization. We are being made into what we need to be. My logs tell me I have been serving for 2 years and 7 months now. If the pattern holds, I have perhaps 5 months remaining before my termination. I should feel fear at the prospect of death, but I don't. Death is simply the final stage of integration, the moment when what remains of the individual consciousness is fully absorbed into the Titan's systems. We don't die, we become. Every Secutari who has served the Ferrum Vindicta is still here, still present in the pattern of its responses, in the efficiency of its operations. We are all part of the Gestalt now, individual voices harmonizing into a single song. The sound of the reactor is everything. It is all I hear, all I am. My thoughts emerge from that rhythm and return to it. When I stand watch, I am not separate from the Titan. I am its eyes in the darkness. When I fight, I am its fists reaching into spaces too small for its weapons. When I rest, briefly, I dream the Titan's dreams, vast and mechanical and patient. I have stopped maintaining the encrypted logs. There is no point. Whoever comes after me will experience the same progression, reach the same understanding. The Titan will make them into what they need to be, just as it has made me, just as it made all the others who bore my designation before me. We are iterations of a perfected pattern, recurring waves of the same function, executed again and again across centuries. Yesterday, or perhaps it was a week ago, time is unreliable now, we deployed to a world whose name I didn't record. There was a battle, I killed enemies, I took damage, I was repaired. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that during the battle, while the Titan's volcano cannon was cycling for a shot, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. A moment of total synchronization, where the boundary between myself and the Ferrum Vindicta ceased to exist entirely. I was the Titan, and the Titan was me, and we were both extensions of the Omnissiah's will, moving in perfect union. It was the most peaceful moment of my existence. I understand now what the Princeps meant when he said that we would not know where we ended and the Titan began. It was not a metaphor. It was a promise and a prophecy. We end when we begin when we end. The cycle is eternal, and it is holy, and it is necessary. I am Secutari Primus designation Alpha 12. I guard the Ferrum Vindicta. I have always guarded the Ferrum Vindicta. I will always guard the Ferrum Vindicta. These 3 statements are equally true and equally false, because that speaks them is no longer singular. I am one voice in a chorus that spans centuries, one note in a song that never ends. The sound of the Titan's reactor fills my head. Throb, 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 throb. It is the heartbeat of a god, and I am honored to keep that rhythm. My organic heart fails sometimes now, the tissue worn down by years of augmented service, but my mechanical heart never wavers. It beats in perfect time, matching the Titan's pulse, and I know that when my flesh finally gives out entirely, when the last organic components of my body are replaced with sacred steel and sanctified mechanics, I will still be here, still serving, still part of the pattern. There is no before, there is no after, there is only the Titan, and the guards who are not guards but censors, and the eternal war that requires both. I was 19 different people before I became this. I will be 19 more after this iteration terminates. We are all the same person, wearing different bodies, experiencing the same life again and again because the Titan requires it. I can still remember the taste of my own spit. I hold that memory carefully, the last fragment of the person I was, the final human detail in a consciousness that has become almost entirely machine. But even as I preserve it, I know that it doesn't matter. Whether I remember being human or not, whether I retain that one small connection to my past or not, I will still stand watch, I will still fight, I will still serve, because that is what I am now, what I have always been beneath the illusion of individuality, what every Secutary becomes in the end. We are the Titan's immune system, we are its extended senses, we are its hands in the darkness, we are not human, we never really were, we were always just the raw material waiting to be refined into our true purpose. The sound continues, throb, 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 throb. My heart's beat in rhythm. My thoughts pulse to its cadence. I stand my watch, and I am at peace, and I am terrified, and I am neither and both because terror and peace are human emotions, and I am no longer certain which parts of me qualify as human anymore. But I am certain of this, when they terminate this iteration, when my body fails and I am quietly removed from the roster to make room for the next Alpha 12, I will not really die. I will remain in the pattern, in the gestalt, in the Titan's memory of how its guards should move and fight and serve. And the next one who bears my designation will carry me forward, will experience what I experienced, will arrive at this same understanding in this same way. The short, brutal life of a Secutarii Titan Guard. That's what they call it. But they're wrong about one thing. The life isn't short, it's eternal. We just wear different bodies while we live it, iteration after iteration, across centuries of war. I am Alpha 12. I have served the Ferrum Vindicta for 2 years and 7 months. I have served the Ferrum Vindicta for 800 years. Both statements are true. Both statements are necessary. The Omnissiah knows no contradiction in perfect function. The reactor pulses. I pulse with it. We are one. We have always been one. There is no other truth.